So it took a few weeks, but we ended up getting some nice okra transplants here. Now when I planted, what's up Lazy Dog fam? Hope all y'all are having a wonderful day. It is Wednesday, May 24th here in South Georgia. And on today's video, we're gonna finish planting the rest of this plot here behind me. Gonna do a little succession planting with some squash and zucchini, and also finally get our okra transplants in the ground. So here in our second oldest no-till plot, we've got 3 rows of peppers over here and a blank canvas to work with here. All the rain we've had lately, it's got the little mushrooms popping up everywhere. Our peppers are doing well. About time to add one more line of string for our Florida weave trellis. Already starting to get some of these nice tasty little Santa Fe grand peppers on this row here. So before we do any planting or talk about what we're going to be planting, let me go ahead and put 2 new drip lines in this empty space right here. One for our squash and zucchini and one for our okra. Alright, so we got our 2 drip lines in place. That was easy, hooking them up to this main line that was already here. This is where our squash is going to go. We used our standard FAD procedure here, made a furrow, amended the furrow with Nature Safe 855, added the drip tape and covered it up. Over here where we're going to be putting the okra, doing things a little bit different, which I'll explain in a minute, but as you can obviously see, we didn't really cover up that drip tape. I did put some dirt on top of it on the end there and kind of in the middle just to hold it in place. So now let's talk about why we're planting more squash when we already have some squash plants here in the raised bed garden. So these 3 squash plants have been producing great for us. I picked them yesterday, probably need to pick them again today with all the rain we've been having. These fruits get big quick, and so you kind of have to stay on top of your picking. Plants look pretty good, but if we take a closer look, we can start to see some disease developing on those leaves there with those yellow spots. So one of the crucial mistakes you can make as a gardener is leaving plants in a spot too long, especially when they get ridden with disease or pest issues. They can still be producing, but if the plants look pretty sickly or are starting to look pretty sickly, all you're really doing is providing a breeding ground for those pests and diseases. This is especially important if you live in a southern climate where it doesn't get cold enough in the winter to kill those fungal spores and insect eggs, and they overwinter in your soil. So if you leave some infected plants in your soil for a long time, you're just adding more and more of those fungal spores and insect eggs to cause even bigger problems down the road. That's why we like to succession plant our squash and zucchini. We like to plant some early like we did these here, get some good production off of them, but once those plants start looking like they're getting some disease on them, we want to plant some more. That way we can have some nice continual production. Now I'm not going to pull those 3 squash plants right now, but I may pull them in the next few weeks. So what we're doing today is kind of planning ahead so we can still have some squash production. And ideally, you'd like to plan this out so your second round of squash was starting to produce when you were going to remove your first round of squash. That doesn't always work out. We don't always plan it perfectly. And sometimes it's nice to have a little break from squash and then go back to eating squash again. That way we don't get tired of eating it. Now years ago when we were growing veggies to sell and I really needed that continual production, I would push the envelope as far as how many succession plantings of squash I could get between, say, spring and middle to end of July when it's just too hot and humid to try growing squash down here. But now that we're not selling veggies anymore, usually I only do about 2 or 3 succession plantings of squash or zucchini. So we got the first one in the raised bed. We'll plant another one today. I might plant one more, I might not. We'll just have to see how the weather does and how quickly it gets too hot and humid for squash. So we're going to be planting 2 varieties today. We're going to be planting more of the grand prize yellow straight neck squash, which is what we have back there in that raised bed. And then we're also going to be planting some of this Pantheon zucchini. This is a hybrid Costata romanesca type. We've grown it for the last 2 years. Really like this, like the texture on it, like the flavor. It is an absolute winner, and we try to grow it every year. So we're going to split this row half Pantheon zucchini and then half grand prize yellow straight neck. Now I can see where my drip emitters are here, where these water spots are. Probably going to put seeds every 2 foot along this row here. I gave myself room, a good bit of room from left to right here where the plants can kind of crawl. So I'm going to plant them kind of close along the row here, and we'll let them kind of grow out this way or this way. And I'm not going to plant directly on top of the tape, on top of this emitter. I'm going to plant to the side of it a little bit. I found that works a little better with the squash. So about 2 foot from my main line there. I'm actually going to put 2 seeds here. So one there, kind of right beside that emitter. And then we'll just lightly cover them up. And that emitter is close enough to feed those plants, keep them nice and happy once they start growing. We will thin these out once they germinate, but I like to put 2 in each spot there, make sure I have a nice full row. All right, so we got that row of squash and zucchini planted there. Now let's head to the greenhouse and grab our okra transplants that are going to go here. Now before we grab those okra transplants, I want to give you a little update on our turmeric pre-sprouting strategy here that we started about 2.5, 3 weeks ago. So now we're starting to see some sprouts there. Not on all of those little pieces, but on a majority of them. New ones are popping up every single day. We have had to water this soil every 2 or 3 days, just kind of keep it moist. Someone mentioned that we could have sped up the process a little bit if we'd have put a little sheet of clear plastic on top, kind of created a humidity dome. Might try that next year, but so far this looks like an effective technique, and we need to go and get our turmeric spot ready because some of these are going to be ready to plant really soon. And then right beside that turmeric, we've got our little tray here of Dwarf Cowhorn Okra transplants. These tested our patience a little bit, but we ended up getting a full tray, as you can see. So it took a few weeks, but we ended up getting some nice okra transplants here. Now when I planted my seeds in this tray, I didn't do anything special to the seeds prior to planting. I just watered them every day, and after about 2 weeks they all came up and we ended up getting 100% germination. Now Cajun B, who grew these seeds for us over in Louisiana, says that what he does with these Dwarf Cowhorn Okra seeds is he soaks them in water with a couple drops of bleach in there overnight, and then he gets pretty fast germination with them. I guess the bleach kind of breaks down that hard outer shell on the okra seed. So if you grab some of these seeds from our website at lazydogfarm.com, you might want to try that with a couple drops of bleach. Now this is later than I normally plant okra down here in South Georgia, but I'm not really worried about it. We still have plenty of warm weather left, plenty of prime okra growing weather. And as we talked about in that last video when we were harvesting taters, we've had a cooler than normal spring down here this year. So I'm not sure, even if we would have gone ahead and got some okra transplants in the ground, I'm not sure they would have grown that much. These things don't really take off till it gets nice and hot. So there may not have been much of an advantage to trying to get an early start on okra down here this year. Now as far as our planting or growing strategy goes, let's talk about why we didn't use our FAD system for this okra here, why we didn't fertilize, why we didn't cover the drip tape. So let's start off with the fertilizer. So it has been my experience, especially with these open pollinated, kind of more heirloom okra varieties, if you feed them too much, you'll just get all plant and it will really delay the pod production. So I don't use any pre-plant fertilizer on my okra because when I have, it seemed like it took a while for the plants to kind of burn through that nutrient supply and eventually start producing pods. Okra plants seem to produce more when the plants are a little more nutrient starved. Now on the contrary, if you take a hybrid variety of okra like the jambalaya that we used to grow a lot of, it seemed to like being fertilized and it would do okay. It would still produce at 18, 24 inches tall if it had been fed. But these open pollinated heirloom types don't seem to like it as much, and it will kind of just make them make all plant, no pods. Now as far as not burying the drip tape goes, a lot of times I don't even use drip tape on okra. It's pretty drought tolerant and usually keeps kicking even if we get a stretch of 2 or 3 weeks without any rain. Having some consistent water will improve production a little bit though. I already had this main line in place here, so I figured it won't hurt to run a drip line for the okra, but I'm not burying it as you saw earlier because okra roots will anchor down in the soil like nothing else. And I have buried drip tape before and planted okra on top of it, and it's almost impossible to get the drip tape up. So I don't want to plant these on top of the tape where the roots can kind of wrap around that tape because it's hard to get it up. So instead we're going to leave the tape on top of the soil, plant the transplants beside the tape. That way the roots are below the tape, not wrapping around it or grabbing hold to it. Now normally I'll plant okra on a 2 foot or sometimes even a 1 foot spacing, but I'm putting these transplants 3 foot apart. This dwarf cowhorn variety doesn't get real tall, but it gets pretty bushy, so I'm gonna give these plants a little room to bush out there, and also myself a little room to get in there and harvest between the plants. So we've got our transplants laid out here with 2 emitters between each transplant. Since we have a 12-inch emitter spacing, that equates to a 3 foot plant spacing. And like I said, I'm not planting these on top of the tape, just going to plant them right beside that emitter there. Can keep it watered, keep it nice and happy, but our tape won't get wound up in those okra roots. And for just that little bit there, a 30-foot row with 9 plants, we'll get a heap of okra production from that, especially with this variety here, which gets kind of bushy, branches out. We get okra production all over the plant, not just on top of the plant. And with this variety, you can let the pods get pretty long before they get tough. And the fact that the pods stay tender at longer lengths works perfect with my summer schedule. So the kids are out of school now. We'll be taking a few camping trips over the summer. That means I'm not going to be here to pick okra every other day like we would have to with some varieties. I can pick this okra once every week, twice every week. As long as we picked it clean when we did it, it would probably still be okay, and we wouldn't have a lot of pods that would get too long and tough on us. So this is going to work out good, having this more forgiving variety growing for us during the summer. So I hope you enjoyed the video today, and if you want to grab some of those dwarf cowhorn okra seeds, you can do that on our website at lazydogfarm.com. And if you want to see some other okra varieties that we've trialed over the years, check out this video right here. We've grown a lot of different okra varieties, and in this video we'll show you one specific trial and tell you what we liked and what we didn't like about those varieties. So check that out, and we'll see you next time right here at Lazy Dog Farm.